This is Venezuela, the country with the largest oil reserves and until the middle of the last century, the richest country in South America. Until 2012, crowds of tourists could be found on the streets of Venezuela. Europeans and Americans wanted to come here. There were low food prices and high salaries for teachers and doctors. Things were going so well that Venezuela was the largest consumer of whiskey in the world. But today, the situation has changed dramatically. About 80% of the country's population lives below the poverty line. Millions of people lack food, clothing, and medicine. So what happened here? And what does oil have to do with it? Today, in 10 minutes, I'll tell you how Venezuela ended up at the rock bottom and why things are so bad in the country with the largest oil reserves. Hello! This is the backside of Venezuela, which is not covered in any travel guide. Let's go! Until 1913, Venezuela was a rather poor agricultural country until oil was discovered on its territory. Oil production began in 1917, and it turned out that almost everyone needed this oil because the First World War was ongoing. And when you find oil in your country, and in this case, a lot of oil, you win the lottery. In fact, it means that you have a lot of money and you don't have to produce anything yourself. You just go out and buy what everyone else is doing. This is what happened to Venezuela. Since 1935, the country has been living only on the export of black gold. And in the early 50s, Venezuela rose significantly to the level of the richest country in Latin America. The huge oil revenues allowed the government to throw money around and the society to turn a blind eye to unresolved problems. This is a big problem. You think you are doing well, but in reality, you depend on only one product. Here are Venezuela's top 5 exports: oil, oil products, precious stones, iron, and aluminum. How much do you think oil exports account for? 40? 50? 70? Or 90%? As of 2018, 90% of all exports were oil. And we remember what happens to resource-based economies such as Brazil or Iraq. The first sign that things were going badly was back in 1980, when global oil prices fell and the economy began to fall apart immediately. Massive riots broke out in the country. This is not surprising because when you live off of only one resource, your entire budget depends on price fluctuations for that one commodity. Of course, there are examples of countries such as Qatar, Canada, or the Emirates, where oil money was not spent in full, but was set aside from the stabilization fund. This means that if your economy does not have enough money to pay pensions, for example, you can always use oil money. But this is not the case with Venezuela. There is another nuance. Since the 90s, the only Venezuelan company has been producing oil not alone, but together with the American companies Mobil, Chevron, Norwegian Total, and British Petroleum. This meant that part of the money from oil went past Venezuela, and one man decided to change that. In 1999, Hugo Chavez came to power in the country. He is a charismatic and flamboyant politician who positions himself as a president of the people. His speeches were vivid and ephemeral. At the same time, Chavez disliked the United States and was friends with everyone who supported him in this. Once he even said that Venezuela and the United States could not be in the same time zone, and the clocks were actually set back 30 minutes after that. In addition, there were a lot of quite funny bans from Chavez. For example, in 2009, Chavez banned people from singing in the shower and washing for more than 3 minutes. And the same Chavez thought that many people were profiting from him and decided to nationalize most of the oil business. Companies were offered a choice, either to give a controlling stake to a Venezuelan company or to leave. Most of the companies agreed to Chavez's terms because it was very profitable to produce local oil. but American companies began to sue Venezuela and even managed to win something. But the worst thing for the Venezuelans was that due to the breach with the Americans, Venezuela lost access to oil refining technologies. As a result, oil production, which accounted for 70% of the country's exports, began to decline. While in 1998, it was producing 3.5 million barrels per day, in 2013, it was already 2.5 million. At the same time, Chavez began to spend the money from oil sales on social needs. He began to subsidize food, improved education, and the healthcare system. And it worked. In 2004, Venezuela's GDP grew by 17% and then continued to grow by double digits for several years. At the same time, the level of poverty was falling. For example, the number of families living below the poverty line decreased by half from 54% to 26% from 2003 to 2008. It would seem that things are getting better, life in the country is improving, but the whole economy is still dependent on world oil prices. Instead of transforming the economy, money was spent on populist socialism. And it was clear that all these social programs exist as long as oil prices are high. Here is an example of electricity in the country. In 2007, all energy companies were merged into a single company. 100% of the population was connected to electricity. The prices were very low. In fact, it was almost free for the population. But at some point, consumption increased, but there was not enough capacity. No new power lines were built, and so the first energy crisis occurred in 2010. Since 2012, oil revenues have been falling, investments halved, GDP fell 3 times. But this was only the beginning. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss interesting insights about other countries. The best way to support the channel is to like this video. Thank you. Awesome! After the death of Hugo Chavez in 2013, Maduro came to power, continuing the path of his predecessor and relying on oil sales. And then in 2015, oil sales plummeted globally. When prices fell by half, the government did not have enough money to provide for the poor, who accounted for 82% of the population at the time. As a result, there were riots and rallies in the streets, and opposition leaders were imprisoned. Against this backdrop, in 2017, the United States imposed sanctions for human rights violations. It was forbidden to use dollars to attract investment in Venezuelan bonds. This basically meant the country was cut off from the global financial market. The country is experiencing inflation, which is reaching outer space levels. In 2018 alone, it amounted to 130,000%. The country's economy is collapsing. In 2019, the opposition leader Juan Guaido, who was then the Speaker of Parliament, appeared in Venezuela. Against the backdrop of rallies after Maduro's inauguration for a second term, Guaido proclaims himself interim president of the country. After which, dual power and chaos begin in Venezuela. There is a shortage of everything in the country. There is nothing in the stores. There are huge lines for food, and electricity is cut off throughout the country. It will come as a surprise to you, but the hospital could not write a prescription because there was no paper. There was a paper crisis in the country, and it led to the fact that a roll of toilet paper cost half a salary. It got to the point where the price of a piece of paper on which a banknote was printed was worth more than the money itself. Printing money became unprofitable. In 2019, the United States imposed a ban on transactions with a Venezuelan oil company and blocked all Venezuelan assets in the United States. And this is given that 40% of Venezuelan oil went to the United States. Immediately after the blockade, Maduro said that the country could no longer buy medicines, food, and other goods around the world. More than $20 billion was frozen, not only in American, but also in European banks. But most importantly, the United States has stopped buying oil. revenues from oil sales fell 3 times. As a result, Maduro remains in power and Guaido dissolves his interim government. From 2012 to 2021, the country's economy fell by 80%. As a result of this policy, about 80% of the country's population is now below the poverty line. The country is experiencing a humanitarian catastrophe. Over the past few years, more than 6 million people have left Venezuela. As a result, the country has only 28 million inhabitants left. But recently, the situation has improved a bit. The country's GDP has grown by an average of 5% over the past 3 years. Now supermarkets are full of food and there are no queues. All prices are in dollars, but you can pay in the local currency of bolivars at the central bank rate. There is even toilet paper available for $4. At the same time, Venezuela is still among the countries with the highest inflation in the world. Currently, the average income for 59% of the people is about $100 per month. We can also talk about the favelas, or as they are called in Venezuela, Venezuelan barrios. As in Brazil or other Latin American countries, it is a state within a state. Salaries here do not even reach $10. People live very poorly. All such areas are naturally under the influence of criminal groups. Today, mafia clans have enormous influence. The government needed them to suppress those movements that the police could not suppress. So to speak, this is another type of security forces that could support the existing government using unconventional methods. Many statistical publications call Venezuela the most dangerous country in the world, and the city of Caracas the most dangerous in the world. The number of murders per 100,000 inhabitants is 81.4. Venezuela tops the list of countries with the cheapest gasoline, but there are some problems with buying it. Some states still have a rule that you can buy gasoline based on license plates. For example, if the last 2 digits on the license plates were 01, it was your turn on Mondays. Now you can buy gasoline according to 2 systems. The first is the international price. Then you can buy gasoline any day without queuing, but a liter of gasoline will cost $0.5. The second system is state-run. Here, you can buy 120 liters per month for less than $1. To do this, you need to register in the electronic system and show your fingerprint at the gas station. But once again, gasoline is not produced in Venezuela, but is imported from Iran, because all the refineries are very outdated. This once again shows how the country with the largest oil reserves has suffered because of this very oil. How a policy aimed at selling just one resource can lead your people to poverty. Do you think Venezuela will be able to regain its strength and be a rich country again? Write in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you like it, please click the like button. See you later. Bye.